The majority of us are so preoccupied with our daily chores and comforts, so much that we either overlook or dismiss the pain and suffering of the unfortunate people or children around us. Everybody has a history, where you're coming from and where you're going. Some have had it good, and some, through no fault of their own, have had it tough. Here, I'm inviting you to enter the uncomfortable zone of the runaway children, rejected children, orphans and parents using their children for financial gain. These are broken children. It is very sad to see one side of the city. People are celebrating too many riches, joy and happiness, and on the other side it is all gloom, pain and emptiness. The children end up on the streets for several reasons. They have no choice. They are either abandoned, orphaned or disowned by their parents. Instead of being judgmental, I have tried to discover why there are so many children and young mothers begging in the streets of Kampala. The invisible face of child poverty includes children living in broken relationships. They suffer serious psychological problems which may last forever. Poverty affects children more than adults, with its effects damaging the child from present to future. Street children accompanied by their mothers to beg on the street is a reflection of a broken society, a society which has failed to support or improve the lives of its citizens and future generations. Some people think that it is poverty and AIDS that causes children to leave home. I beg to disagree. The problem goes beyond that. Well-to-do families too have lost children to the streets and seen that the children that stay at home are generally not happy. This is because, just like the poor families, rich children too like to be acknowledged, like to be loved, a boost of self-esteem, a sense of belonging and a sense of family. I have never seen so much poverty. Children and adults collectively sleeping on the shop veranda, small children begging on the streets. I witnessed children bathing in water mixed with sewage down the bridge at Old Kampala bus park. Growing up on the streets must be extremely hard.
I have been chairman since 1992. The situation here is very unhappy indeed. Health-wise, the situation is unbearable. The people endure a horrible stench. The sewage system does not come here. We say we are in Kampala, but look around you. Look at the state of this place. We are only a short walk away from central Kampala, but it looks like we are living in two separate countries. The impact of the government is very slow. There is still a great need for help.
While in Kampala, I met 4 kinds of street children. The orphans, the kids without mama or papa. These are the children who have lost both parents as a result of AIDS or HIV. The runaways. These kids have either been abused by parents and relatives. They move to live on the streets because they cannot face mistreatment and neglect at home anymore. There is a common belief: home cannot provide them with basic necessities. The moneymakers. The children are employed to beg either by their parents, relatives or masters. This is the Karamonjong connection. The Karamonjong kids work on the streets because their earnings are needed by their families. They are effectively breadwinners. A home and street kid. This is the kid who spends all day on the street and sleeps in the house in the night. The children I spoke to came from different places in Uganda, namely Soroti, Gulu, Karamoja, Luero and Serere. However, the majority of street beggars are from Karamoja land. The main cause of problems today are abusive parents or guardians, lack of education, armed conflict between tribes, inadequate services and entrenched poverty. These children are sneered upon as though they were a problem. Well, they are not the problem. The kids I encountered were not dangerous. Yes, they were insecure, but were able to respond to genuine interest and kindness. If anything, society is the problem. Society has failed to listen and guide these children. They need someone to listen to them, and most of all, they need affection, and all the things they didn't get at home. Society needs to change the negative attitude of blame. The face of child poverty is both visible and invisible. It is visible to those who care about the welfare of the children, and is invisible to those who don't care to know or understand the source or the cause of the problem. For instance, the bureaucrats have failed to grasp the pain and anguish that the children are experiencing on the street. These kids have to fend for themselves. They have poor access to healthcare and social services. In their tattered clothing, they roam the streets, ransacking heaps of garbage in search of food. Food is not easily available on the streets of Kampala. Some lucky ones manage to collect leftover food dumped in the bins by restaurants. For some, half a cup of porridge without sugar will have to suffice. They have been called scavengers. Some of the kids have that hazy look in their eye as a result of sniffing aviation fuel. Nobody is poorer than street children. They don't have a home or anything of their own. It is a tough life on the streets of Kampala, and the government seems totally oblivious of the dilemmas.
It relaxes the person. We are not allowed to take it, but we do. They are sniffing aeroplane fuel. It is sold to us by some people. 100 shillings. It's soaked in cotton or small cloth.
There will always be the assumption that children are bad based on their deviant behaviour. However, it is important to remember that these are judgments only, and mostly based on ignorance and social surrounding. For instance, in England, children growing up in a council estate are judged as troublemakers regardless. In Uganda, children growing up in slum areas are regarded as thieves and criminals. These assumptions are not always correct. One bad apple in a basket does not make the whole lot rotten.
Actually, we are not thieves. But when we are in Soroti, some people use us as thieves. They would give us money, then they would ask us to steal it. They use us to do the stealing on their behalf. The older peers tell us to steal stuff for them. They use us to steal and then hand over the proceeds to them.
Not every child in the street is bad or is a thief. For those who have become thieves, it is society who has allowed that to happen through negative and judgmental attitudes towards poor children. Speak to the children and you will soon realise that they are truly innocent, gentle, loving and trusting. I saw love and trust from Ben and his teammates. The society that does not look after its young generation is a broken society. While speaking to these children, I soon realised that besides loneliness, they are also deprived of family love, care and protection. They have no mama or papa to turn to for comfort or approval. These children have to learn very quickly to adjust to the life on the street. The children I saw were between the ages of 8 and 17 years old. They live in the street and sleep on the shop verandas. Police are doing nothing constructive about street children. The government is using the police as clean-up squads. All they do is antagonise the children. It is usually at night when Ben and his team retire that the police pounce on them during their routine operations. The children scamper in all directions. They are hit with sticks, sending them in disarray. The young ones, aged 8 to 12 years, are rounded up and taken to Kampala Rehabilitation Centre in Mpigi district. The older ones, when arrested, are simply beaten at times on the assumption they are thieves or are in the process of stealing something.
We were beaten because the police assumed we wanted to steal. 3 of us were beaten by the police. City council disturb us very much. They beat us up. The council officials are always harassing us. At times they come here in the night and arrest us.
What the police are doing to these children would never happen in Western countries. This cannot be right. The children have no redress. They are treated with disdain by the police and some members of the public. They are seen as a nuisance. Adults need education on how to interact with children. These kids are the future. It also became apparent to me that policymakers and service providers find it difficult to describe and target the needs of these children. There's a breakdown in communication between the children and mostly police and Kampala City Council Authority. The children do not trust the police or the City Council workers. They run away from them because they have been mistreated and beaten by the authorities, hence a breakdown in trust.
There is no mistreatment in Kampiringisa. The kids think they are being taken to prison, so they scatter and run away. They prefer to stay in Kampala because that's where they can make a living. The police are always arresting girls and young kids. They are transported to another place about 20 kilometers away. Young girls are raped. They come to the shelter at night and take them away. Any money in their possession is taken. The officials arrest people and take the children to Kampiringisa.
Children living in broken homes, parents forcing them to mature very quickly in the streets, is unacceptable in any society that claims to be caring towards its citizens. These children are desperate to be understood. They are desperate to be helped. They are desperate to have another chance with their families. All the 6 children I spoke to are desperate for someone to give them another chance. They are willing to go back to school. The parents cannot afford to pay fees. They are hoping some good Samaritan or the government will help finance their education. This is a sad state of affairs. The children are begging for help.
My parents cannot afford to pay my fees. I left school when I was a senior 1. It was universal education. Parents are supposed to help to buy books, pens, but my parents couldn't manage it. We do not pickpocket. All I want now is for the government to help me to go back to school. My parents wanted me to stay at home and work. They didn't want me to go to school. I decided to run away. I moved to Soroti. I did some work there, begging and collecting bottles to sell. The situation of the children is very bad. The majority of them are orphans. Countries like Europe, America, England and others do send assistance, but their help does not reach these children. Some organizations come here, round up 100 children. They pick only 10 to 20 to be helped. Those that get the chance to go to school are lucky, but the rest, as you can see, are not.
Another problem is society's ignorance, which remains so immovable. Parents and lawmakers continue to produce severe pain and destructivity in all goodwill in every generation. Most people tolerate this blindly because the origins of human violence in children have been and are still being ignored, with the exception of Sweden and Norway worldwide. For some reason, adults find it relatively easy to abuse children. It could be because children are unable to respond effectively to the aggression. In short, the abuse comes from one direction, from the adult. Almost all small children are smacked during the first 3 years of life when they begin to walk and to touch objects which may not be touched. This happens at exactly the time when the human brain builds up its structure and should thus learn kindness, truthfulness and love, but never cruelty and lies.
I left because my parents were treating me badly. I was beaten constantly. Whenever I come back from school, I was made to do hard work. There was no time to do homework. When I didn't finish work, I was beaten. That's the reason I left home. Even human rights people did not want to help me. So I ran away to Soroti, and then to Kampala.
Poverty is one of the greatest hindrances to the successes and the education sector in Uganda. The majority of people are poor. The parents cannot afford scholastic materials for their children. This results in children attending school irregularly as they spare some days to help with parents at work.
They said from school they want case, suitcase, they want money for uniform. Now that money, if the parent don't have, that is the end of the kid for schooling.
Ben is a direct victim of this. Although he is a bright kid, poverty and ignorance is progressively blighting his future.
I would like to be a doctor so that I can help people back home. When I came to the streets, I was expecting to make money so that I can buy a uniform. But now any money I get is taken by the older boys. They beat me and take away all our money.
Ben was expected to help his parents after school, regardless of whether he had homework or not. He was beaten at home if he did not help his father, and he was beaten at school if he did not do his homework. The whole concept of education, especially in very poor families, is foreign. For them, survival is the name of the game. It is equally dangerous for girls to be on the streets night or day begging. Girls are a constant target of sexual abuse. They can be attacked anytime and at will by usually male perpetrators. It is indeed shockingly one of the fastest ways of creating more street children riddled with poverty, right from conception to the grave. Homes and families are part of a larger society, and the underlying reason for poverty or breakdown of homes and families may be social, economic, political, or environmental, or a combination of these. Poverty, famine, exploitation by adults, dislocation through migration, being disowned, the orphaning of children as a result of AIDS or HIV.
I lost my dad and mom to AIDS. I was born in a family of only boys, and the firstborn died from AIDS. He was born with AIDS and he died. So I was the second born, but I wasn't sick. It was a miracle.
The majority of Uganda is generally rich, fertile soil. It's blessed with regular rainfall. There is coffee for export. There's tourism. It's got relatively sizable mineral deposits of cobalt, gold, copper, and other minerals. In fact, Uganda shouldn't have to rely on international aid year after year. The government should encourage farming, encourage its citizens to utilize the land, make people proud to be Ugandans. It is an embarrassment, a shame and a disgrace to even begin to imagine that the majority of Africa cannot feed its own citizens. The majority of the African governments have gotten so reliant to handouts from the international community to an excessively dangerous point. No responsible government with abundance of such fresh waters can watch its citizens starve. Uganda has a problem, and the government and all the players have to positively find a solution and address that problem.
You know, Uganda is full of many tribes. So if we go to which tribe, we have over 50. When you go down the street, you may find that we have many kids from the north. So that explains well why the kids are many all the time. So what you do, you just go read about Uganda and read about the northern part of Uganda. That's where we've been having the war. It's kind of a war-torn area where Kony and his rebels have been killing people and hijacking kids and doing all that. So they come here for greener pastures, for a peaceful place. In my own view, it's very hard for you to find kids from the central, kids from the western side. It's not because there are no orphans there, but maybe because the relatives have really tried to do their work, the people concerned after the mom dies, and then there is peace. There is peace in that place.
Kisenyi is within Kampala, and the Karamojong colony is just a stone's throw away from Kisenyi market. As you can see, one is straight away confronted with horrific poverty. Kisenyi is unbelievably overcrowded and extremely dirty. Channels of semi-green stagnant water and rotting garbage fill the air with a full blast of permanent, horrible stench. The place is full of small single-room shacks which serve as living rooms and bedrooms. These huts are shared between 10 to 20 people. Life is tough. The things that most of us take for granted, like human welfare, hygiene, housing, living conditions and quality of life, are horribly missing in Kisenyi. Just see for yourself. Just briefly, who are the Karamojong? The Karamojong tribe is located in northeastern Uganda. They are a pastoral group who inhabit the plateau region of Uganda, namely Kotido, Moroto and Nakapiri Period. They are of Nilo-Hamitic descent and are cattle herders. The landscape is flat, it is dry, hot and the climate is extremely variable. The region generally gets heavy rainfall in April, which dries up by November. When the rain stops, this dictates a nomadic pastoral existence, supplemented by small-scale seasonal agriculture on the flat savanna. The dry season is very windy, and there's no surface water, except for the puddles left over for the rainy season, which quickly dry up. Their pattern of land use it closely related to their habitat. There are two primary patterns of land use, which are reflected in two distinct types of settlement. Permanent settlements have internal compounds, sleeping houses, and granaries with large storehouses. These people live in the central part of Karamojong. Their base is somehow fixed because of the availability of reliable permanent water, and their mobility is limited by the need to store gardening implements and grain. In short, with the exception of milk products, the food consumed is generally the product of the land, agriculture. Temporal camps are primarily a complex of corrals to contain cattle, sheep and goats, and they usually have only temporary shelters for humans. The campers are in the eastern and western portions of Karamojong territory. They are mobile because of the need to respond quickly to the changes in grazing and availability of water. The majority of the activities of the camp are primarily pastoral, and their food is primarily milk and blood, almost exclusively produced from the herd. Meat is rarely eaten, unless the animal dies or there's a public ceremony. Because of their environment, the Karamojong cannot subsist by cultivation alone, hence they attach greater importance to raising livestock. Cattle are a key element in the Karamojong culture. They are highly valued both in economic and social terms. Nothing is wasted. Meat, milk and blood provide sustenance. Fat is both food and cosmetic. Urine is used as a cleanser. Hides make sleeping skins. Bell collars, sandals, armlets and leglets. Hooves and horns provide snuff holders. Bags are made from scrotes. Intestines are used for prophecy. Droppings are used for fertilizer. Cattle are literally wealth in the Karamojong culture. It is almost a God-given right. The Karamojong must have cattle in mass. The Karamojong people and their history will require a documentary in itself.
They are killing people in Moroto. People come and steal food from the garden. There's cattle rustling, and then there are people with guns. The Turkana from Kenya are also terrorizing us. The real reason why we are leaving is because of our hostile neighbors. It is very unsettled.
Why have the Karamojong moved to Kampala? While the Karamojong have collectively been concerned about preserving their livelihoods, this effort has become increasingly difficult due to increasing pressure on available resources. I have spoken to some of the Karamojong people in Kampala, and they all seem to agree that hunger and poverty, along with other factors, is increasingly driving them out of their homeland, Karamoja. For instance, prolonged lack of rain, drought and poor farming, persistent poor harvest as a result of dry spells, cattle rustling, cattle death and insecurity, constant fighting with one another for food, and generally having limited resources of income, poor governance and landlessness. In short, the reason for moving to the capital Kampala is economic. The majority of those who travel to the capital have the inner belief that their lives will be transformed for the better. However, this assumption has already proved to be horribly misguided. Upon arrival to Kampala, they have discovered that they cannot get jobs due to illiteracy, lack of skills, and language barriers. Another problem they have encountered is that they have been marginalised. The majority of people in Kampala have not welcomed them with open arms. Why? The Karamojong are perceived to be hostile, dirty, uncivilized, and have failed to move with the times. There is no denying the quality of life is strained and considerably poor. It is also worth mentioning, only a few years ago, the Karamojong had a bloody conflict with neighbours in Uganda, Kenya and Sudan due to cattle raids. Many innocent people lost their lives and livelihoods. That terrible experience is still raw to some people. Those who were not directly affected are wary of the Karamojong. The Karamojong are not trusted.
The problem with money is very bad. The children cannot go to school now because the parents haven't got the money. The children help the parents to get money. You see, the children used to be cattle herders. They do not know the value of going to school. So they have to take to the streets to beg. Pedestrians are not sympathetic to adults, but they are always sympathetic to children. These children are like an investment to the parents.
While speaking to the chairman of Kisenyi and the two representatives of the Karamojong community, I got the impression there is a great deal of insecurity, illiteracy, poor health, poor infrastructure. They are struggling to integrate in a place where they are not really wanted.
Sometimes they can even come at night. When we have read the sleep, they open the door, they collect things like their beans, money, children, they collect all of them, children over men, they put them in companies. Now some companies are there, it's a part of Brazil, this one. Now if they reach there, no food, no education, even if somebody feels sick, it is up to you, nobody's bothering about it.
The chairman of the community of Kisenyi talked sympathetically of the Karamojong people. He seemed connected and understood exactly the dilemma these community were going through. His heartfelt message is for Kampala City Council and the government to step in to help the Karamojong community. He also reiterated the great need for the children to be sent to school. He is totally against the whole idea of sending children to beg on the streets. Despite the provision of primary education by the government, over 50% of school-age children are not attending classes. The parents would rather have the children beg on the street.
There are many tribes in the area. The Karamojong are the majority and do not want to take the children to school. The mothers and parents are using them to go to the streets to beg. There is no employment or source of employment. In Karamojong, they are used to taking care of the cattle. The only alternatives for them is to send children to beg for money in the street. As a fellow Ugandan, I would like the tribes living here to join together to better the place. I want to see improvement. I want to see the place cleaned up. I would like to see these children taken to school. These children are being used in the streets to beg, and that's why they are not going to school. Some people are truly willing, however, some youth are not willing to work, adding to the deprivation of the area.
One of the Karamojong representatives did try to explain the reasons why the children were not registered to any of the schools in Kampala. First, he lamented the discrimination. He claims that no school in Kampala is willing to register Karamojong children, although this allegation is not verified.
Now, I want my children to study. What can I do? I can't go to minister office to help me. He just give me the telephone number. Now, if I come and let me ring, it's not available. Now, what is that?
However, he went on to say, while in Karamojong, many parents did not send their children to school because they wanted the children to help in cattle and family chores. He reiterated how it was very important to train the young offspring the value of livestock, cattle breeding, and the Karamojong culture. Education was not regarded as important by the majority of the Karamojong. By migrating to Kampala, the environment is different. The newfound life has forced them to change their priorities and values. They no longer have cattle to look after. They are now focused on how to get money, buy food, pay rent and look after the family. However, it is almost impossible for the majority of them to get jobs. They are severely handicapped by illiteracy, culture and language barriers. To overcome this problem, the Karamojong have come up with a rather radical solution, drafting children and young mothers onto the streets of Kampala to beg. As far as they are concerned, it works, and it is not considered as child abuse. He said they love their children very much. The children are simply helping the parents to earn a living. The money earned pays rent and buys food. The cost of rent is 500 shillings per head. Children are breadwinners. The public is more sympathetic towards children and are more likely to offer children money and food. He seemed totally oblivious of the hardship that the children go through. That left me wondering what sort of future is awaiting these unfortunate children. If it is true that behaviour is learned through close association with people whose attitudes, skills and beliefs are so children, they are already being groomed in an environment that is inadequately socialised. There is a lot of pain, suffering both on the street and at home, combined with lack of education. It is hard to see how these children will progress as adults. The authorities need to step in and help now. God help these children. They are already being groomed in an environment that is inadequately socialised. There is a lot of pain, suffering both on the street and at home, combined with lack of education. It is hard to see how these children will progress as adults. The authorities need to step in and help now. Charity begins at home, then the government needs to help the poor at home first, starting in Kampala. I'm not a politician. All I'm asking is for the children to be taken away from the horrific life of poverty. It's horrid and indeed shameful to see small children begging on the streets.
What we are suggesting to request the government, if they fail to assist we big people, let them assist our children. Put them in school only. We don't want any assistance from them, but we want them to assist our children.
England, along with other Western countries, are pouring aid to Uganda year after year. Alas, there's no real improvement. This is like giving money to someone who's got a huge hole in their pockets. You will never see that money ever again. The only difference here is that the international aid seems to be ending in a few people's pockets. Some African leaders are in office just to enrich themselves, their relatives and their militaries. The donor countries probably haven't yet grasped the fact, or they are simply in a state of denial.
Those people, they are just making money. They are thinking for their salary and family, but not for Koromojong.
So not done anything for you?
Nothing at all.
No.
Nothing at all.
But you've gone out to meet them?
Sorry?
You've gone out to meet them?
You can meet them, you can call them even here, we discuss, but nothing can happen.
You shouldn't generalize that. Like, hey, every NGO has not been faithful. We are here. And there are many out there. I know some that are really good, very accountable to every penny and to every cost. But sometimes it's a growth. We have people who are not even caring about it. They don't care about kids.
The company noted that the problem of street children is real and has continued to persist despite several interventions. Fears were expressed that soon all policy interventions will have no meaningful impact. The committee also acknowledged that the government treats the matter with laxity. Institutional establishments are not supported with regards to addressing the problem of the street children. Cases of uncertainty and mandates have been noted, particularly between the central government and the district local governments.
Now what about Koromojong? Moroba Koromojong, they are Ugandans.
What about
The Somalia, they are refugees. Now what is that? Is it not a socialism?
What about
That is a socialism. If they can get out of people, they land somewhere in Uganda. Now what about Koromojong? What does it mean? It means Koromojong, they are not a human being in Uganda, they are animals.